Businesses that never fail, is that even a thing? Is there a concept as a business that never fails? Well, no, not really. But there are some industries and some businesses that have wildly low failure rates. So in this video, we're going to explore 3 different types of businesses that hardly ever fail. We're also going to discuss what it looks like to pick out that specific business that you want to invest your time, your capital, and your life in. My name is Justin Mirche, and I am the CEO of Justin Mirche Consulting. We help business owners get access to credit and capital. So statistically, 2/3 of all small businesses are going to fail over the long term. So it's important as an entrepreneur, as a future business owner, that you try to find industries that aren't brutal when it comes to success rate. We know that statistically, 20% of all businesses are going to fail in that first year. That's 1/5 of all businesses are going to fail in that first year. Within 5 years, half of those businesses are going to be gone. And again, within the long term, or 10 years, 2/3 of businesses aren't going to be around. And there's lots of different reasons why businesses fail. It's not necessarily due to incompetence. It could be that their marketing strategy was off. It could be that there wasn't a real need in their specific area for their particular business. In most cases, the #1 reason that companies are going to fail, though, is really just going to be access to cash and credit and capital. It usually becomes a cash flow issue because it always costs more to start a business and keep a business going than what people anticipate. It always takes longer to get a business going to create revenue than what most people think. They think, they'll anticipate that it'll take X time, but the reality is it's X times X time. So new business owners tend to undershoot how much runway they're going to need in terms of capital. So when it comes to deciding on a business, obviously, we're going to want to do our very best to go with a business that has a very high success rate. And that'll make sure that we have the biggest probability of being successful. So how do you choose what business that you want to go into? How do you even know that if you've never even had a business? Well, it really depends. Some people are about the bottom line. If they're making money and there's high money potential, they're going to be willing to go into that industry, provided they do the legwork on it, they have the funds to kind of get there. Then there's people who are doing what they want to do. They are doing what they like, right? Which is amazing because I'm a passionate person. I'm blessed to be able to do what I like every single day. I went to school, got a degree in finance. I went to work in the corporate world, and I found out very quickly that the corporate world wasn't for me. First of all, what I discovered was that I'm not a guy who can drink the Kool-Aid very well. So I wasn't ever really able to buy into corporate culture. I'm more black and white. So if it's not a good idea, I tend to say it's not a good idea, and that doesn't work very well for the corporate world. But then also, I didn't want to spend 10, 20, 30 years trying to build out a career making somebody else millions of dollars. That was problematic for me because I could see the revenue that I was bringing in and the value that I was bringing in, but my pay was nothing compared to what I thought it should be. So for me, I took my passion, which happens to be anything finance. I'm an active day trader. I love everything credit, everything funding, everything finance. A good evening for me is studying stocks and looking at financial statements. That's what I love to do. So ultimately, I ended up getting into the credit industry. Really, it was because my wife, she had mentioned it to me. She's like, you love this stuff. Why don't you create a business around the credit industry? And then I had to figure out, how am I going to structure the business? How am I going to monetize the business? What does all that look like? So for me, I spent a full year while I was working on my last career, which is actually in the software industry, figuring out what this would look like for myself. While I was kept my other job. And so I always recommend for people, don't necessarily chase the money. If you're good at what you do, you're bringing value to the market, and you're passionate, of course, you're going to make money. You're not going to make $1 million your first year, but you're going to make money and you're going to grow that business. If you're just in an industry because you're chasing the dollars, in many cases, it becomes very apparent You can tell when business owners aren't real passionate about what they do, but it's just a job, right? A good example is, sometimes people that own franchises. It's not that they don't love what they do. It's just, it's a built-in system. They work every day, Monday through Sunday. They manage somebody else's concept with, all their marketing and all of that. So they may be a little bit lackluster, but then there's some franchises, like as an example, Chick-fil-A, those owners are in love with that concept, right? They are in love with it. They're all bought in it, so it really just kind of depends on your temperament and what you want to do, right? Doing thorough research initially to try to figure out what your industry even looks like. Try to figure out, what is your income level now, and what income level you're trying to achieve. As an example, again, I've got a degree in finance. People with degrees in finance tend to do very well, and I did do well. So for me, I couldn't go into an industry that wouldn't support my family, right? That wouldn't let us live in kind of our accustomed style. So I was limited in certain ways because there were some things that I wanted to do that I ran the numbers and I was like, I love it, but it's probably not going to work out long term for me. So as you're going in and you're trying to do the research and you're trying to figure out what it is that you want to do, you want to, again, try to stick with industries that have a high success rate. Okay, so all the industries that I'm going to talk about right now have a very high success rate, somewhere around 85% or higher, which again, for a business, because the failure rate's so high, that is incredible. And the first one that I want to talk about is going to be real estate. Of course, real estate rentals. What I love so much about the real estate rental industry is there's lots of different ways to kind of ramp up your business. But one of the most important things is that you're going to have a tangible asset that's going to appreciate over time. The next thing that I like about it is that there's lots of different tax write-offs. There's mortgage interest write-off. There is depreciation. There's all kinds of different ways that you can whittle down your taxable income so you're not paying a whole bunch of money in taxes. And the final thing is that it's going to be steady income. Now, what you're going to make per rental isn't going to be an incredible amount per door. In general, you're going to make somewhere around $400 or $500 per door or per rental. So you've got to have quite a few of those to actually support yourself. But what ends up happening over time is that appreciated value paying down the principal, which is what your renters are going to do, you end up building fantastic wealth over time. And there's lots of different ways to grow that business. One of my favorite ways to grow that business is to buy a duplex or a quad. Go in and live in one of the units, so it's not an investment property. So you're able to purchase it with 3 or 5% down instead of 25% down as an investment property. And then you're able to rent out the other sides. It pays for the whole building. And then after a year, you can go buy another quad or another townhome or another single family dwelling. And you can do the same thing all over again. Some of the things that cause people not to want to go into real estate is that the overhead is outrageous, right? So if you go buy, as an example, a home for $400,000, if it's an investment property, you're going to be required to put 25% down. On $400,000, that's $100,000. And I just told you that your average kind of net after it's all said and done each month is going to be around $400, $500. It would take you an eternity to recoup that $100,000. So that's one of the reasons that a lot of people don't like to go into this particular industry. So if you're flexible and you're able to move around, move your family around, or if you're single or newly married without kids, move yourselves around every year or two, you can actually build a whole beautiful portfolio of real estate relatively inexpensively. Your next business venture that's going to have an extremely high success rate is going to be vending machines. And what I like so much about vending machines is that you don't have to bet your whole entire life on the company. The startup costs are relatively low, $3,000 to $5,000 in general, sometimes more like $10,000 depending on the vending machine. But you can get these machines, used. In fact, my neighbor has a couple of vending machines next door that he's actually selling. And I don't know what the overall price was, but it's pretty common to be able to get used vending machines. So your out of pocket is not going to be very much at all. What's beautiful about vending machines is not only is the low startup costs, not only the very low failure rate, but as a startup business, you're able to generate revenue, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. You're not going to become a millionaire off having a couple of vending machines. However, it is a really good way to get your foot in the door to start a business. You're going to learn so much about inventory. You're going to learn so much about cost analysis. You're going to learn so much about hot areas and traffic and just how overall business works. And it's going to set you up in the future to do some really cool things in business. Really, your only overhead cost for vending machines is going to be your location site. And then really just the maintenance of the machines and restocking. It's really a passive way to earn income so you can keep your W-2 job, you can keep your current job while you're building that cash flow. Because in business, cash flow is king. Starting to have revenue is incredibly important. And once that revenue starts to pour in and you start to get multiple different machines and multiple different locations, now you've got a for real side hustle or maybe even a full-time job. It's pretty hard to scale a vending machine company to just kind of take over everything and make hundreds of thousands of dollars. That'd be a lot of vending machines. It's done. There's some big outfits out there that actually do that. But for the most part, it's a really good way, a really inexpensive way to get your foot in the door for your own business. Okay, and the final business that I want to talk about is going to be laundromats. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy because you're thinking to yourself, well, gosh, who uses laundromats? But the reality is that roughly 10–15% of the population still goes to the laundromat to do their laundry. They might be renters. They might just be a big family that has lots of bedding and lots of things to get done, and they just prefer to spend a couple hours to get it all done at the same time. But believe it or not, laundromats are a lucrative business. And what I like so much about laundromats, kind of like vending machines, is that the startup is relatively low. You need some washers, you need some dryers, you need a facility, and then really you just need to maintain that facility, and then the money just comes in. People are going to go to laundromats. From a business perspective, laundromats are so appealing because people have to wash their clothes. It doesn't matter if there's a recession, they need to wash their clothes. It doesn't matter if they lost their job, they still have to wash their clothes. Doesn't matter what's going on in their life, they have to go wash their clothes. I've seen people that start laundromats, they do all kinds of added service too. They do drop-off service, and they have other little things going on within their laundromat that help kind of bring in revenue. Of course, that kind of hurts this idea that we can kind of set it and forget it, right? Because ideally for a laundromat, you just want to be able to maintain it, take your money every day, and you don't want to be too hands-on. If you offer other services, then of course you've got to hire employees. It's very labor intensive, and that kind of makes the business a little less appealing. But from a failure rate perspective, laundromats hardly ever fail. It's a fantastic way to build businesses. So we've talked about some really good business ideas that are pretty much failure proof, if there is such a thing. That require pretty low startup costs, minus the real estate rentals, but we've discussed a really good way for you to get your first rental and then not get hit with that 20–25% down for investment property, live in it, stay there for a year, and then move, and now you have 2 properties, and then 3 properties, and 4 properties. So over a 10 years time frame, if you don't mind moving, you can do some pretty cool things with real estate, and then guess what? You look up 10 or 20 years later and you're worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. The only downfall to that is it's not going to support you most likely, right? Because you only make a little bit of money each month, $400 or $500 each month, which means you'd have to have a bunch to make, significant revenue and live off that. But that's not really the goal for rentals. The goal for rentals is to build out that real estate empire. And then what's so beautiful, and if you know me, you know I love the word leverage, you get to leverage those properties to begin other businesses. So it's kind of a slow roll, and before you know it, you've got a lot of assets to do really cool other things. We also talked about vending machines. It's on the opposite side of real estate, super cheap to get things started, a great way to learn business. And then we talked about laundromats, which is kind of in between the both. There's lots of other businesses that have lower failure rates or higher success rates. These are just 3 that we had discussed. Now, of course, to get any business started and to try to grow that business and even get your foot in the door on a business, you're going to need to have access to credit and capital. You're going to need funding. Of course, for most business owners, they come with a little bit of their nest egg that they've provided, a few $1,000s, and then they get the rest from business credit using their EIN only. They use their personal credit, maybe sometimes to leverage things. If you'd like to learn more about getting funding for your business idea, click in the link below. I have a 4-step guide on how to build business credit, or you can go to my website and request a consultation, and we can have that discussion.